Ladies and gentlemen, I am now with Brandon Stone. Basically, I've seen his work on Instagram, and he has a clothing shop, a clothing line that he started. And what really drew me to it was not just the unique designs that he's using, but the fact that he's integrated in all of this his faith. And a lot of it is just very cool. And so I started seeing like all kinds of testimonies and stuff like that. So immediately I gravitated to that and was like, oh, I'd like to leave my testimony. In which case, I will include a link to this in the description where he's actually shared my testimony on his page as well. But what I would like to do is I'd kind of like to just introduce you to the audience, because he's not only a clothing designer, but he's also a musician and has just released an album. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So Brandon, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, a little bit of your background, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, hey guys, I'm Brandon Stone. I'm 24 years old, and I'm the founder of Ruach, both a clothing line, now a band. Really, it's a movement of people who, we're just really passionate about seeing people come alive in their giftings and the things that they aspire to. And so we create content and share testimonies, create product, all that kind of stuff, kind of centered around this idea of coming alive and going from death to life. And so I'm privileged to be on here. It's a lot of fun, and I'm really glad that Robert reached out to me. So I'm excited for us to just connect and have a fun time.
Let's sort of unpack what exactly Ruach means, because I think a lot of people, like me having studied a little bit of Hebrew myself, I'm like, as soon as I seen it, I was like, ooh, that's cool. But for those maybe who are watching this and are like, that's kind of a unique name, what does that mean? Like, give us a little bit of a backstory about how you came up with it and exactly what that means to you.
Man, I would love to. So the Hebrew word for Ruach actually means the breath of God. And so there's 377 occurrences from the Old Testament through the New Testament. But I think the most amazing thing about this word Ruach, the simplicity of it, is breath. And it has to do with describing God's nature and us as human beings. Like, in him we move and we have our being. That's where we get that scripture. And in the very beginning of Genesis, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form or void, and the Spirit of God was brooding over or hovering over the face of the deep. And so that word Ruach has anything to do with the Spirit of God or his nature, and how that connects to us as human beings, because we are, spiritual beings. We're made with a body, a soul, and a spirit. And so that's really what Ruach is all about. And it's funny because the logo is Ruvch and Ruach is Ruach. And so the reason that like the A is a V has to do with it being flipped is there's a very deep meaning, and we'll probably go into that later. But Ruach as a brand is really just about people coming alive in their gifting and understanding that each of us have a breath, and with that breath, we can change the world. So,
dude, that's awesome. That's a great explanation too, because a lot of times when I'm speaking to people and telling them about my testimony, that's one of the things that I always will, when I'm talking, like, let's just say, I'll just throw this out there. Me and my dad used to, before they shut the program down, I wish they never would have, but we would go on Wednesdays to the juvenile detention center, and we would talk to these incarcerated young people whose lives were completely messed up on drugs, on alcohol, or, they were dealing with family abuse at home. And one thing that I would always tell them is I would say, whatever it is that you're doing to try to fill that God-shaped void, you're not fulfilling your intended purpose for being on earth. And everything that you're ever going to try to do to try to fill that void is just going to come up empty. And it never would cease to amaze me that every time I would start talking like that, and I would give a little bit of my testimony about where God brought me from, some of these like cold, hard, they would start crying. And I remember with this one kid, he looked at me, I think he was 13 years old and was incarcerated in this prison. And he looked at me and he said, why am I crying? Like, he was so mad, like, because he didn't cry, He said, why am I crying? And I said, because when God created you, he breathed the breath of life into you. And that same breath that he breathed into you became a living soul And that soul is crying back out to God whom gave that soul because it wants to be reunited with its creator. Why you are crying is because you are feeling the tug of that creator saying, come back to where you need to be. And dude, he just like from that day forward, we had this connection. I would come in there and he was kind of like the leader of the pack anyway. So I think God purposely like had us, have that moment.
Yeah.
Because then every time I came in there, it was like he could arrest their attention and be like, hey guys, settle down. He's talking, like, let's listen. And it's like, just like what you said though. I mean, literally like the breath of God. It's amazing to think like the breath of God is inside of us.
Yeah. Come on.
Is that not cool? So how did this clothing brand then, like, was there like an epiphany? Did you just have this moment where you felt as if God was telling you like, like this jumped out at you at scripture while you were studying, or how did that transform into a clothing brand?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm looking at thinking about all these times, and there were so many like moments and little like hints, that I would walk into a Hot Topic store and see like shirts with skulls on it and stuff and be drawn to it. But it was always about death. It was never about life. And when I was 12 years old, and this is really the moment, when I was 12 years old, I was at a summer camp, as most teenagers go to. Their parents take them and all that stuff. Or anyway, some teenagers that I know, they're like, I'm never going to summer camp. And I'm like, dude, go to summer camp. It'll change your life. Like, that's what changed my life, And so at 12 years old, during a worship time, one of the pastors came up to me and just began to speak life over me. And he's like, this is what I believe God is doing in your life. And like, just began to prophesy over me and like speak the word over my life. And I had this encounter with God, and it was very deep, and it was very mysterious in the sense that, and I'll talk more about this later with more of my testimony, but it was actually an out-of-body experience where I came out of my body and I was like a spirit, like coming
Wow.
out, and it's crazy. But what God showed me is he took me to my future, and I literally could see that same moment where I went into Hot Topic, and there were these like designs with life on it. Like, it looked gritty and it looked dark, but it was life on it. In my whole life, I've always been that guy. Like, I noticed that someone has a Bella Canvas t-shirt on over a Gildan t-shirt, like I've always been able to like pick up on that, or like see the corduroy on a jacket, Anyway, so for a long time, like growing up, I experienced a lot of just like, exposure to fashion and clothing and all that kind of stuff. And I remember saying to myself, like, one day I'm going to be a Disney Channel star,
All right.
because I love like music and I love the whole, like, just that kind of world. And so that took me into the world of like fashion and designing. That all came just over the last few years. So from the time I was 12 years old on, I kind of held on to that dream, and I just, in baby steps, just kept believing that it was going to come together. And so I was down in California, at Redding, California, and I went to a school down there called BSSM, the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. And that was the place where I was like reintroduced to God, like where my relationship with God was like solidified. And without going into too much detail, I know that so many people see some of these different churches like Hillsong, Bethel, etc., and there's so much noise out there about it being like a cult and all this kind of stuff. And as someone who actually went through it, it changed my life being through that school. And I actually experienced God in a way that was so deep, and still to this day has actually set me up where my foundation with God was very deep. And so my passion for, like, I used to say my passion's for fashion, like all the time, but it was during that time where God was like revealing these different designs to me. And I remember at one point, before it was Ruach, it was going to be called Living Sacrifice. And there was going to be like this idol on the altar, like being burned up or something, like just like these really out there, almost metalcore screamo ideas. And so over time, even though it is still kind of an edgy look with the skulls and the breath in it and all that kind of stuff, there's an example, the Kainos design, and then also the more gritty Rising Again design. But my passion for fashion changed, and it kind of has been in me the whole time, but really over the last few years, it's kind of all come together. And so I would say there were a couple of defining moments, like I mentioned, being in like going to summer camp and stuff, but it really has just been taking the risk that that's going to like come together and it's going to happen. And so all that to say, I had a journal for years and I used to draw in it, and it just had like these little squiggles around it, like just journals and journals of these tiny little squiggles about that big, and they all kind of came together. And then I was at the church interning when I came back home a few years later, and I had an iPad, and I started out on Adobe Draw before using Procreate and Canva and some of that kind of stuff. And so it really has just been kind of this gradual process. And so without going into just too much detail, that was kind of where Ruach started from.
So there's some of these designs that are hanging up behind you. Can you get maybe a little bit closer shots of those so we can see those, and maybe even explain like where the design concept came from?
Absolutely. So what's funny is this design, it's pronounced Kainos, K-A-I-N-O-S. It's a Greek word, and it has to do with, it means new life in Greek, or fresh breath. That's what the word kainos means. And so the imagery of it is a skull that was once dead, having the breath of God, the squiggles inside the nose and the eyes, and then the plant on top, meaning that, you know, new things can come from death. It takes the death of a dream for new things to come alive. And so that design, I actually met a guy, so it's kind of a longer kind of story, so I'll briefly say it. But this guy, 𝗬𝗏, he saw some of the stuff we were doing on Ruach, and somehow, some way he got connected with me and said, hey, I want to send you some art. And it was prophetic. And it literally was that design just without the breath of God and that cool font. And it was in like green and black in a painting. So it's on a canvas. And when it arrived, it had a big old hole in it from just like the shipping, and it kind of got destroyed. But that's what makes, I feel like what makes that design really awesome is I took that thing that was on a canvas that was kind of broken and tattered, and then like we created and I recreated that design with his permission. And so we collaborated on that one. So kind of a fun story. I love to do things in community. That's one of the things we did on the album. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, later. But there was just a lot of fun, cool things that we did with art and designing with other people in the community. One of my favorite designs we've done is the Rising Again one, primarily because I'm learning how to screen print. And I screen printed that one. So this is my extra small. I only have like one of every size other than what's on Teespring. You can get those all day. But anyways, it says, "This the sound of the fallen US tour." And then the red letters say Rising and then Again. And the song Rising Again that we put out on our first EP and is the bonus track on the album. That's what this design is all about. And so the numbers at the bottom spell out Rising Again as like a cipher. So like 1 is A, B is 2, that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's probably one of my favorites because literally there's cities in here from people in the community. And then I put Roseburg in there because that's where we're from, and I wanted to do that. So yeah, just kind of and the guy Joel that actually created this in India, he's a Christian designer. And I told him what I was thinking for the merchandise and kind of my vision. And he's also the guy that did that font that says Rising Again and the Ruach logo, the new one. So yeah, our new Ruach logo was also custom design. So Joel did that, and it's pretty cool. It's also on the album.
Dude, that is awesome looking.
Yeah, So yeah, thanks, man. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But yeah, so anyway, Ruach has changed a lot from like never wanted it to be a boxed in Christian brand, but like I had a really hard time trying to fit in with Christian brands. You know what I mean? Like it's outside the box. It's kind of, it doesn't say like faith, hope, and love. I mean, and that's great. Like it's great for that audience, but with what we're doing with Ruach, I feel like it's so much like bigger in that sense, with reaching other places. And
and I'm sure you're probably going to receive, if you haven't already, a little bit of pushback from some of within the Christian community.
Absolutely.
Much like they did, when DC Talk came out and they released Jesus Freak. And everybody was going nuts. Like, whoa, what is this? What are they doing? This is crazy. But then how many countless people came to listen to Christian music just simply because of that song? So kudos to you, man, for stepping out and trying to look at things in a different viewpoint. So let's get into the little aspect of this music side of things.
Yeah, it's kind of let's see. Well, I did choir for 8 years, and I was involved in that in school. And prior to kind of like rededicating my life to the Lord, at a summer camp by chance. So it's funny, at 12 I was called, and then like by 16, 17 I'm having this radical encounter with God and like being filled with the Holy Spirit. Like it's amazing. But prior to that, I was doing choir, and then actually what happened was I wanted to change it up, and I wanted to sing and play guitar, but I didn't know how to play guitar. So I went to my teacher and I was like, hey, can you teach me guitar? And he said, you're going to have to give up choir if that's something you want to do. So I was torn. I went to my dad because my dad's a worship leader, and I've sang on stage with him since I was a young kid. And so growing up in the church, like without going too much into detail of my testimony, I had so much exposure to church, but I never had a relationship with God. And so I sang and did worship, but it wasn't like heartfelt. You know what I mean? A lot of when I picked up that guitar, the acoustic, I learned how to like worship. And it was in that where, as I rededicated my life to the Lord at 16, 17, I began to pick up that acoustic and worship. And for me, that's where everything changed. I've been playing guitar for almost 10 years now. And so to write an album and do that with music, and to write an album that's all about God and all about like breathing again and living again, like the total opposite of where I was when I first picked up the guitar and was singing. It's pretty amazing to see everything come kind of full circle. I love that scripture in Romans 8 where it says God makes all things work together for those that love him and are called according to his purpose, those whom he has already predestined, right? And so like each of us, from before we were even born, God had a plan. It does not mean that each and every single one of us, there's only so many that are going to heaven. That's all BS. That's not true. Like the truth is that every single one of us have been called by God, have been designed by God to have a relationship with him. And it looks different. I understand that some people aren't going to walk into a church, but maybe through the gift of music, they'll experience God and their lives would be changed. And so that's my hope, and that's my prayer with why we as a youth group went after writing an album. So
what was that whole process like whenever you were sitting down to write this album? Let's sort of like break it down into chunks. What was the songwriting process, the structure in that? And then we'll touch on like, what kind of engineering aspect of it did you use? So we'll talk more about like sort of the not so like the esoteric, I guess, if you want to call it that, the more heartfelt side of it, as far as writing songs. And then we'll talk more about the technical side of things as far as like, what did you use and how did you do it? So first off though, like where did the songs come from? Did they just come to you, or is it a community effort? Explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so lyrically, I wrote every lyric on the album. There were people, kids in the youth group, that connected to the lyrics, and they're like, I want to do that, you know? Or I approached Zoe and I was like, hey, we wrote this vibe of a song and it feels like you. Would you consider being on the song? And she's like, oh my gosh, this is the lyrics. Like, oh, I connect to it, you know? My sister Bella did Blow on Us, the song, and she had no idea that she was going to be walking through the craziness that she walked through, but that song helped her get through it. So it's like God knew, you know? And so there's so many testimonies already just with the songwriting process and having them come in. I've had the song Forward, I've had in my journal for 7 years. Just waiting for the right timing.
Wow.
A couple of years ago, I wrote it, but I had this little blurb of my life will never be the same. I'm never looking back. And that's all I had. And then we turned it into a rap rock song and added the end of the chorus. So there's that. The song Rising Again, I wrote. So get this. This will be kind of a mind blower for you. When I approached my family about this and I told them that I wrote this song during a really depressing time of being a youth pastor, I wrote the song Rising Again about living again and breathing again. But during that time, I was experiencing depression. I was going through a rough time. The song Blow on Us was written during COVID. So it's like, you know, like people are dying, yet God is breathing life. And so it's this paradox. But at the same time, the whole album was written from a place of victory and from a place of like knowing that God is good, knowing that that God won. That's what the song The Crown is all about. And so each of the songs are so pivotal, not just doctrinally or with theology, but just the way that we believe and in my own heart, like the way that I believe about God. And so I wrote those lyrics from that place. And that is kind of the beauty of this album. It's called Souls and Bones. The entire album is about going from death to life, but it's all written like from heaven's perspective.
That's good.
And that's what separates it, I feel like, from a lot of just music. And my hope and my prayers, as people listen to it, they come alive on the inside and they have hope and they have dreams again and they feel like they can take on the world, you know? So.
Dude, that's awesome. That is awesome. I know, I commend you for doing it as well, because I know personally, I've sort of dealt with similar situations where, and I'm sure if you haven't experienced it, you're going to experience it, some pushback, some flack. You're going to get some people. It's like, why are you doing this? What is this stuff? What's going on? When I first started writing, when I got in church, God completely transformed my life. And I knew from that day forward, I was like, I cannot play the same kind of music that I've always played, but I still have this style and I can't change my style. So what do I do with it? Like, I can't play like these gospel guys are playing. I can't play like, you know, these people are playing. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to fit into this? And I thought, well, I'm just going to write from my heart, whatever comes to my heart. And I'm going to use my style, because God is obviously, if he's watched over me this entire time, he's molded me to what I am now. There's a purpose for that. And so I can still remember some of the first couple of songs that I wrote was really not me at all. It was me trying to be like someone else. And so I was like, these are okay, but they weren't getting, not only were they not getting the results that I thought they should get, but I just wasn't even happy playing them, because I'm like, this isn't even me, you know? And then you have that epiphany as an artist or as a creative where you're like, you know what? Why don't I just do me? God made me in his image. He knows what he's doing. Why don't I just be myself and see what happens? And then not only was it so much more fun, but I was actually getting the responses that I felt like I was supposed to be getting, because I feel like whenever when you're walking away from God, whatever his plans might be, whatever his purpose might be in your life, when you're walking away from him, the Bible says he's the way, the truth, and the life. It also calls him the light of the world. And when you're walking away from the light, you're literally walking in the shadows. And every step that you take and every mile that you're farther from him, it just gets darker and darker. And the moment that God can just like, whoop, you know, get you on that pivotal moment, like a 180, and turn you around, and you realize this whole time I've been walking thinking I was all alone, but he's been right behind me. And now he's ready to just sort of pick me up and, all right, let's dust you off, get you back on track. I want to talk now a little bit about the more technical side of things. So a lot of people in my audience, especially, they're going to want to know, obviously we're going to want links. We want some links to hear this music. I'm excited for it. But I'd like to know, like, you know, what DAW did you use? What was your recording process like? What was the favorite microphone or your favorite pedal that you used? Or just talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects of it.
Yeah, so what I don't know is the exact model. I know the branding because it wasn't my studio. It's our youth studio. So Isaac, the guy that produced it, he knows all those questions.
Awesome.
And I would probably just forward those to you when I can, just so you have them, so you have that info. I can talk pedals and guitar stuff all day. I just don't know the
right
stuff. I know we use Logic for all of that, and
okay.
It was a very fun process. I actually got to pick up quite a few of the parts and play them and learn how. And Isaac's really good about that. There were times where I came in and all I had was a riff, but he helped me create a song. And there were times where all I had was a lyric. He helped me put a chord progression together, and we built something from that. So it's a very different process than just you're come in for 2 days, you're going to do the music, you know. Because I work at the church as well and doing youth ministry and stuff, it made it very kind of hard to find time for that. But when we did, we put a couple of hours in and just like push, you know, and did the work for that. But from a technical side, I used the Line 6 Pod Go, and that's my pedal board for the most part. I have added on a few pedals as time has gone on. I have a solo Dallas Storm, kind of the AC/DC Schaefer replica pedal. It's so much fun. Oh my gosh. I have the Lightspeed by Greer Amps. We use that for the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 song. So there's a couple of songs as time's gone on where you hear a little bit of change in the tonality. And part of that has to do with the pedals and changing some of those. I have the 𝗶𝗲 by Electro-Harmonix, which is an octave pedal, and I use that on the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 song, which is super awesome. It's right in the intro, and it's just a cool bend thing I do with the big octave pedal. I've used the OCD Overdrive for years. That's pretty much my primary pedal. A new addition, I bought the 𝗧𝗏 by Walrus Audio, and it's not on the Rising Again song, but it's on every single song on the record. So most of my tone comes from that. I love the 𝗶𝗱 5150, big, roaring, screaming loud sound. And then we used, so in the Pod Go, I used like a Princeton amp. I used a Marshall Stack amp. We used that for the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 song. The Rising Again one was a 𝗶𝗱 5150. We used a Mandarin Rocker. Sorry, the orange amp. Sorry, I'm remembering how they come in the Pod Go. So I'm looking over here to remember stuff. Yeah, so anyway, a lot of it just guitar-wise, we just played with stuff in the studio until it sounded the way that I was envisioning and thinking about it. And then Isaac, he did all the production on it. I was there for most of that process. I got to learn how to produce, so that was pretty cool. The 𝗧𝗵𝗲 record, that song specifically, the reason I talk about it so much is it was one of the ones I got to try recording and like laying down tracks and adding compression and EQ and all of that. So, yeah, that was a fun process. So, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, and my guitar is a Schecter Diamond Series PT Fastback with the Sunburst. And so it's got humbuckers in it. They're the Seymour Duncans, and just a great guitar. So
that was my next question. So yeah, I'm a guitar guy myself. So I was like, what guitar was he using? So
that's awesome. Yeah, dude. I didn't even use a single coil one time on the record. I wish we had more guitars to do that. Honestly, we were just in album mode, and I was just like, I love the sound of my Schecter, so it just kind of, made sense to just stick with that. I think there was one song, it was probably Coming Home, the Southern rock song, which I think you're going to dig a lot. But that song, the Coming Home song, I think I used on the bridge pickup. But for the most part, it was just right in the middle. And yeah, so anyways, I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love to sort of peer into the creative mindset of what all went into that. So Isaac, the producer, then he put on, it sounds like actually several different hats.
Yes.
Which is kind of what you have to do nowadays.
He's a drummer too, so like he would do something on the keyboard, but he could jump right on the drum set and play it. That's a skill in itself. It's just amazing. So.
Yeah. Well, and you almost have to, like I said, you almost have to be able to do that stuff these days, because there's so much to it. And if you don't know all of those different aspects, it can be pretty rough. So
absolutely.
So you got this is already released, or it's going to be released, or how?
It's already out. Yeah, so it's on.
Oh, is it cool?
Music, Spotify, YouTube, the whole shebang. And I do have 50 physical copies. I'll show you that.
Oh, sweet. That's
the front, and then the back. And I'll tell you the story behind the album art, because that's a lot of fun.
Yes, please do.
So the album cover was created by Anthony Garola, who's another Believer designer guy, and he's just amazing. He actually called me at like midnight and saw a message, because I had a complication happen. So one of the designers that was going to originally create the album art, he had been working on it for a while and getting ready to send me over the final files, and he had his iPad, his phone stolen, his whole backpack. It was a whole deal. And obviously I went into emergency freakout mode. So I'm like, I have to submit this to CD Baby in 2 days, and to get it out on time. And so Anthony hit me up, and he's like, hey bro, I saw that you're in need of a designer. And he's like, I have closed commissions and all this stuff, but I feel that the Holy Spirit wants me to take this project on and help you finish it. And we featured the original artwork design for Souls and Bones. I put that in with the merchandise just to like honor the guy for doing the work, the other artist. But it didn't end up being the album cover. The one that Anthony did was the album cover. And I'm just so stoked with how this came. I actually have a merchandise design that has this on the front, but Souls and Bones is not there. Instead, it's in like a half circle design, and it says, are we just souls and bones that are waiting for the sun to rise? And it comes around the skull. It's super cool. And then it's got the 3 lines of the lyrics underneath of it. So my hoodie's supposed to be here tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, so I'm just like super excited. And a t-shirt, because I had to get prototypes.
Right.
But yeah, so anyways, super cool story with the album cover and how it all kind of came together. So
yeah, we definitely want some links to not only just to the music, but to the clothing brand. And anything that you have that stickers, any kind of swag you got over there.
All of that. Yeah. So my Teespring website, primarily due to COVID and just really hard to get product right now, I use Teespring primarily. It's now called Spring for Creators. And so The link is really simple. It's ruvch/spring.com, or dash with the, no, dash, not slash. So it's ruvch-spring.com, and that's where I have stickers, I've got mugs, I've got apparel up the yin yang. It's crazy. It's like over 200 products or some ridiculous number, because I wanted to make sure there was plenty of options and colors and all that stuff. So I'm really proud of this project, and especially the artists that were featured. I'm still rolling out the other designs just because it takes a long time to do, and make sure that it looks good on a t-shirt and all that kind of stuff. You can't just slap it on and hope it works.
Right.
The whole process. So but I'm very excited for people to get the official Souls and Bones merch. So
nice.
Yeah.
So do you have any anything in the pipeline as far as, you think after doing this album maybe you're going to do another, or?
Well, we talked about taking some time off just so the youth band can really perform well when we do get to perform and do some of those different local events. Maybe one day we'll, I don't know, do a West Coast tour or something. That'd be super awesome. And then work out into the US tour. But before we do that, really just working with the youth kids just for us to be excellent and perform well. You know, we are looking into getting some new equipment so that we can do some of that kind of stuff, but obviously that costs money, so we're just kind of working a lot of those pieces out. But in terms of what's down the pipeline, probably a year from now, but we're already talking about doing like a pop / some of the bands I would think of that maybe it would make sense for people would be like Pale Waves, the 1975, Laney, Fickle Friends. Oh, I love their tones. Let's see, kind of a Machine Gun Kelly, because you got like a pop punk thing happening, but it's also like the vibey thing. So we're thinking about putting out a couple of songs at least, and at least one single before next year for sure. So
awesome. Well, man, whenever you get that close to release time, let me know. I'll try and share it with actually what we could do is we could just feature it on the channel.
That'd be super cool. Yeah, absolutely.
It was definitely a pleasure chatting with you. I don't want it to stop here though. I want to definitely keep checking in with me. I'll keep checking in with you.
Absolutely, man.
I really appreciate what you're doing. I feel like, you know, if you keep going this direction, God's going to bless. It's just, I mean, he already has. It's just a matter of, you know, sometimes, well, even like with what I'm doing right now, sometimes you feel like you're just grinding, and it's like,
yeah, the grind seasons. Yeah.
And it's exactly like what you just said too, though. It is literally a season, and that's sometimes the hardest lesson to learn, is that this too shall pass, and then it'll get better. And one of the things that before we hop off here, that I wanted to make mention of too, is that your Instagram feed has actually no, it's a good thing. Your Instagram feed has actually been very encouraging. There's a lot of times where I'll stop by there and I'll check out what you're doing, and I see something, you know, that's just incredibly encouraging. So keep doing what you're doing, because if it's encouraging me, it's got to be encouraging someone else. And you know, so yeah, keep up.
Yeah, one life matters. I mean, even if one person sees it 3 years from now or 6 years from now or today, you know,
exactly.
That's how I look at creating content. And I know that we didn't go into any of that, but just the feed is very strategic. There have been times where I've posted 2 or 3 things, and then I'm like, it's not time yet, and I take it out. And you know, for some, maybe they'll look at that and go, why is that posted and then taken down? That's kind of schizophrenic, you know. But like, the thing is, it's a very strategic thing to like put together. Like, if you were to go onto it right now, the very last song on the album is the first thing you see, and if you scroll down probably like a little bit for like, I don't know, a couple seconds, you'll see the beginning of the album. And so it builds up to, and there's like testimony shared, designs, merchandise, like the whole thing. And so all of that is super intentional. And it tells a story. Like if you were to go back to the very beginning leading up to now, it's still telling the same story, just so many different ways and different expressions. So my hope is that if somebody sees that 20 years from now, if Instagram still exists, that they're encouraged. And so that's kind of how I look at creating music, creating content, all that kind of stuff. It's so easy in a world that is about instant gratification. I have to have this now. What I'm learning is when the time is right and it's time to post that or it's time to put that out, that's what you trust. And so when you're talking about the grind, man, there were times where we wanted to put this album out a year ago, but we had, there's no way to do it, or like the thought of an album wasn't even something we thought of 6 months ago. And then it was just little by little by little by little, and then it all just kind of came together. And so in the grind of you doing it, just know that it's all going to come together. And then with that, that's just one piece, one chapter. Then it unfolds into something completely different and expands on it. So I hope that encourages you.
Absolutely, man. You are wise beyond your years. So
appreciate that.
Well, man, it's been a blessing. Like I said, I want to stay in touch.
Yep. Fine.
Definitely send me all the links that you got so that we can share these amongst the socials. And at some point in time in the near future, we're definitely going to have to get together again for some kind of something. I'm not sure yet, but
whatever we put whatever we come up with, be fun. I'm so down for it. So
awesome. Well, God bless you, Brandon.
Awesome.
You have a great day, and thanks for coming on the show, man.
Of course, dude. It was an honor, and I hope you have a great day.
You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Peace.